I'd heard that humans were different, but now I know far more than I want to. I was stationed on a research orbital in the Jicken system, which, at that time, was right on the frontier of controlled space. We were studying a protoplanet in the hopes that we could extract resources from the large body of matter, which our financiers were betting would be easier and more cost-effective than having to extract them on a fully formed planet. I was working spectral analysis, an important job for this type of mission, when I met my first human, Adelaide. Humans had their species debut not too long prior, having discovered FTL travel and gaining the attention of the greater celestial community, which wasted no time in welcoming the new species. Their graduation to FTL-capable society was a notable event, as it was the first new addition to our ranks in 0.5.1 demi-turn, which, as an interesting aside, I later found out was approximately 240 human years, which, with their shorter lifespans, is approximately 8 generations of humans, and there was understandable significant public interest. They passed all the initial investigations and were happily assigned a Compatible Sentient Species designation, CSS 6.056. So unexpected was their reveal that for the longest time you could hardly read a periodical or watch a broadcast without some mention of the new species, though most of the information was far from reliable. Like most at that time, I had some small interest, but as I was working so far from the center of things, I knew any curiosity I had about these humans would likely have to wait until I actually met one. Still, the articles and info pieces I'd seen so far painted an interesting enough picture. Bipedal mammals. That alone made them a curiosity, without having to go into some of the more sensational claims, and now I was going to be cohabiting with one. As I'm sure you can understand, I was quite pleased to have the opportunity to get to know this interesting new species much sooner than I had expected. A notice was sent to all crew advising that human Adelaide was joining the mission as a junior metals analyst, which was unusual as this position was not budgeted for and had not been required in the initial planning brief, not to mention joining partway through the mission. Everyone was full of questions about the situation and the new crew member themselves. Why were they traveling so far to join partway through a rather mundane mission? Did we need to plan for any special conditions for the human? What did this mean for the budget? What if they could read minds? This was asked by Assistant Submanager Gurley, prompted by an article they had read in a less than reputable publication, and so could safely be ignored. The executive has seen fit to provide a summary of information about humans to our orbitals, internal data net, so most of the questions could have been avoided with minimal reading. But being so far from anything interesting, no one wanted to miss an opportunity for some light gossip. In any event, I trusted the executive's summary, far more than the tabloids, for the simple matter that they had a financial incentive to be accurate, always reassuring. It was dry but interesting reading, though it rather aggravatingly prompted more questions than it answered. In brief, humans were described as a robust, adaptive species which hailed from a higher-than-standard gravity planet under a yellow star. They had limited spectrum binocular vision, keen hearing, were endothermal and extracted their energy needs via a relatively simple, omnivorous digestion system. Nothing too untoward there, but I did wonder, having it confirmed by the summary as they were bipedal mammals. No depiction of a tail? What exactly constitutes robust? I would have thought that all evolved species could be considered adaptive, so why does this require mentioning specifically? Being omnivorous was unusual enough, though not exactly rare. But paired with a digestive system, how would that work? Most digestive-styled systems break down their matter by rotting the plant or meat matter and absorbing the nutrient contained. But having enzymes specialized enough that could it cope with meat and plant at the same time? I thought it all quite intriguing, but nothing concerning. Adelaide arrived on the orbital to little overt fanfare and was dutifully given the tour of facilities, making introductions as they went. The crew badge she wore confirmed a few details, which help avoid embarrassment in a mixed species crew. Just a quick reminder before we get started, only 4% of my viewers have subscribed to the channel so far. If you enjoy the content, I'd really appreciate it if you could take a moment to hit that subscribe button and support the channel. Thank you so much. Now continue amazing story. Adelaide was human, female, aged 41, and had no CSS qualifiers, which didn't seem right. every species had CSS qualifiers, the little codes that told you what the species in question did or did not require to avoid harm. 2M383 meant a gelatinous being whose skin layer was corroded by exposure to oils commonly found in most mammalian skin, so don't touch. 3B012 meant an insectoid who would find it detrimental to be separated from their kind. My own badge had some too. Least surprisingly, 5L901. Reptilian requires external heat source at regular intervals, as almost all reptilians have. The humans must be still new enough that their qualifiers hadn't finished being reviewed. Again, intriguing, but not alarming. As an example of her species, Adelaide seemed underwhelming, if I'm being honest. Compared to the other species, on the orbital, she was below average height, even compared to humans in general, according to the information contained in the summary. She had no bright feathers, no variation in coloring to speak of at all, really. No fine pelt, mostly just a crest of hair which, while looking healthy and neat, wasn't exactly impressive in color or height the way that most mammalians were. Straight, white teeth, but no intimidating fangs. Serviceable enough hands and digits, but no claws, and even the musculature was barely worthy of mention, not even close to being imposing. The only feature that really drew attention, and I don't mean this to sound xenophobic, were the eyes. Forward-facing eyes were not unusual in the greater community, having its share of predator-evolved species. But the humans' eyes were different even to them. White eyes, with a colored ring and a black spot in the center. The black spot seemed to be the focus of the structure, and you could see it move depending on where it was looking. Again, moving eyes are common enough, but the coloration gave such startling intensity to her gaze. You knew exactly where she was looking, and when she looked into your eyes, it can only be described as unsettling. There was no doubt that the creature in front of you had you in their sights. You felt tracked, evaluated, and pinned to the spot. I almost shudder recalling how it felt that first time, seeing those black spots, not being able to shake the feeling that the black spots were somehow drawing you in. But I digress. There was a little get-together planned for the evening meal, but in the meantime, I had been voluntold to escort Adelaide to her quarters as they were quite close to my own. Thank you so much. I don't know that I would have been able to find this on my own, but I'm sure it won't take me long to get used to things. You're quite welcome. We were all new once. Pointing out the slate outside the closed door, I was pleased to see Adelaide quickly understand and scan her employee badge, opening the door. I scanned my badge after her and then entered the first room as the lights turned on and habitat controls whirred into life. I took a moment to explain the features of the set of rooms provided to the human, as I suspected they had not had much experience with commercially built, multi-species capable orbitals. They dropped their shoulder bag by the door, which hit the decking with a heavy thump and immediately began to tour the room, their hideous eyes darting around seemingly trying to take in everything at once. I began to reiterate the most important rule of multi-species living, even though it is thoroughly covered by the induction. They should always scan their badge before crossing any threshold within the orbital. As we share the space with so many species, no single habitat settings could encompass everyone. By scanning your badge, it allows the orbital to adjust the room to whatever settings your species requires. And if the room is occupied by a different species already, adjust to a mutually agreeable compromise. We wouldn't want to evaporate a crew member with a 2G024 CSS qualifier by letting them wander into a room with lighting suited for a 3H885 CSS now, would we? Despite my hilarious joke, Adelaide gave no indication that she was listening at all, which I thought was very rude. They were looking through the doorway, touching the walls, even smelling. I said. We wouldn't... Cutting me. Off. Adelaide said, "Yes, sorry, I was listening, but I'm afraid I'm not 100% on my 3 Series CSES qualifiers. We don't tend to get many insectoid species in our neighborhood." Yes. That explains it then, and quite understandable. Really, I replied, I thought, rather graciously. Adelaide continued her inspection, wandering out of sight. I raised my voice slightly. We have a few insectoids in our current roster, so it may be worth looking over the introductory handbook prior to the evening meal. It has all the CSS qualifiers relevant to all the staff you will be working with, and should help you to navigate any potential hazards to yourself. I understand you have no qualifiers listed on your badge currently, so we wouldn't want you to accidentally stumble into an area that may not be viable for you. There are other controls to prevent this, of course. Interrupting again? Adelaide called from what sounded like the bathroom attached to the sleeping quarters. I don't think that should be an issue. How very rude. The guide said nothing about this habit of interrupting. I assure you that safety is always an issue with a multi-species staff, and we take it very seriously. Returning to the entryway, Adelaide replied, My apologies. I didn't mean to imply any lapse by the executive. I only mean that I don't have any CSS qualifiers. I mean, humans don't, generally. Yes, I'm sure that your people are working very hard to remedy that, but in the meantime, please read the handbook for your own safety. Adelaide, having completed the inspection of her rooms, returned to stand in front of me. Though she had to look up slightly to look me in the eyes, I didn't feel any bigger than her in that moment. Those unsettling eyes felt like they were boring right into my head. Thank you. I will be sure to read it. With the intense eye contact, it almost felt like a threat. Of course. I will leave you now to rest and refresh, and will come back to collect you before the evening meal. It was interesting to meet you, human Adelaide. She gave a surprisingly charming giggle. Just Adelaide is fine, and thank you for looking after me on my first day. I look forward to getting to know you, and everyone, better. Well, perhaps she wasn't all that rude after all. Just a long journey, I'm sure. I bowed slightly and turned to leave, but unfortunately caught my foot on the strap of her hastily dropped bag by the door. The bag didn't move a centimeter, and I was almost thrown to the floor by the sudden absence of inertia. Adelaide must have been walking right behind me, as she was just in time to help steady me, preventing what would have been an inelegant tumble. Though I didn't say it at the time, I felt sure I had, almost literally, stumbled upon something I shouldn't have. Adelaide's bag didn't move, but she had carried it into the room. I cannot fathom why, but she must have some powerful magnetic item in her personal bag, which would explain the noise of it thumping earlier as it was attracted to the floor plates. As for why something that powerful and unshielded was in her personal bag, as opposed to her research materials, I can only guess. The crates and boxes had all been delivered to her rooms prior to our arrival. Perhaps Adelaide was doing confidential research and couldn't risk someone seeing the object which was hiding in her bag. That would go some way to explaining her non-standard arrival partway through the mission. Regardless, I wasn't going to risk a note on my employee file by sticking my snout where it wasn't required. I gathered up what dignity I could and left for my own rooms for a cup of relaxing tea and a lie down. I would ponder this more at some other, less stressful time. Arriving back at the humans' rooms to collect them for the evening meal and welcome get-together, I pressed the chime to alert her to my presence. No answer? It's not unheard of for newcomers to take some time to get used to the chimes, alarms, and various noises which our advanced platform makes, and humans were as new as they come. Still, after waiting some time for acknowledgement, I checked to see if the door was unlocked. I don't make a habit of rudely barging into other people's rooms. It's against company policy. But in this case, I felt it was warranted. Who knows what trouble the unsophisticated newcomer had found themselves in, probably stuck in the bathroom. I opened the door and was greeted by, not entirely unpleasant, noise issuing from the sleeping quarters. There was rhythmic beat and surprisingly complex melody, so I suspected native human music, which was confirmed by hearing Adelaide add her voice to the composition. Discovering that humans made music and sang was, well, it was rather lovely. These sorts of details are lacking from the functional and succinct summary sheets provided by the executive. I was drawn into the entry room and towards the doorway of the sleeping quarters by the charming song. I certainly didn't intend to sneak or conceal my presence, but I couldn't bring myself to interrupt. I needn't have worried, as the song ended suddenly of its own accord when Adelaide spoke, what sounded to my ears rather harshly. Now look what you've done! You couldn't keep the room clean for even a day. Good one, doofus, she grumbled. Oh? She has a visitor already, and it sounds like someone she knows well enough to be this informal with. Unless this human is even ruder than I could have ever suspected. Oh well, I'll get that later. Before I could react, Adelaide appeared in the doorway in front of me. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you come in, she said, smiling innocently. I apologize, but I rang the chime but got no answer and was worried that you might need Help. She brushed off my explanation. No worries. I was just getting ready. I'll be with you in a moment. Just need to find where I put my earrings. Adelaide crossed the room and picked up her shoulder bag and dug through it, pulling out 2 pieces of jewelry and holding them up triumphantly in one hand. Found them! She tossed her bag onto a nearby bench seat where it again thumped, heavily. Was the magnetic item still in there? It must have been deactivated if she was able to pick it up off the floor so easily. Maybe the other visitor might give a clue as to what this mystery item is. I tried to gain some more information, asking, I didn't realize you knew anyone from the current staff here. I actually don't. It's going to be exciting meeting everyone. Only, I heard you speaking with someone just before you came out of your sleeping quarters, so I assumed, oh, no, that was me just talking to myself. Sorry. Adelaide replied as if that explained everything. However, it didn't explain everything. It didn't explain anything. I must have misunderstood. Plenty of species talk to themselves. I must not forget my supervisor's birthday, that sort of thing. But I heard you talking to someone else. You said, look what you've done, and you couldn't keep the room clean. You were clearly speaking to someone else. Nope, just me. An unpleasant thought was creeping up on me. I hope you haven't smuggled another being on board. I read in the summary that you humans are partial to keeping lower life forms as pets. I watched as Adelaide's face changed to what I interpreted as shock, or perhaps outrage, and she shot back hotly, I have worked very hard to be here and would never jeopardize that opportunity by breaking the rules like that. Anyway, it would be cruel to keep a pet confined to a couple of rooms like this. I must have let my opinions on keeping animals in your living space show on my features. Unhygienic, to put it very mildly. As the human continued her diatribe, I don't know what the big deal is. I talk to myself. So what? Yes, I give myself pep talks sometimes. You can do it, Adelaide. Or, he's not worth the bullet, don't believe what he says. Is it a bit sad? Maybe. But there isn't anything wrong with that. It's perfectly normal. It was becoming clear to me that I needed to start being very careful with my words, as this may be a potentially damaged individual. Please help me understand something. I spoke calmly. When you're giving these pep talks to Adelaide, who is it that is speaking? Me? It's just me? Adelaide? She seemed to sense that this was not sufficient explanation. Sometimes I talk to past Adelaide like, oh, why did you drink so much? Or, future Adelaide, don't you mess up this interview? Or even just a deeper part of myself like, I know you're scared about starting a new job, but you've got this, you know? It was becoming clearer that this person was unhinged and possibly dangerous. No, I'm sorry, but I don't know. This was not making any rational sense. How can there be more than Adelaide? What? No, there is only one. Only me. Adelaide. It's not like I have multiple personalities or anything. I just talk to myself. She seemed to lose a bit of the fire that had been heating her words as she sighed and sat down on the bench seat. Sorry, I didn't mean to get upset. It's just, I worked really hard for this posting and it's not started out how I had hoped. She passed her hand over her eyes in a tired gesture. I used to struggle with keeping my thoughts in order when I was younger. They would get away from me when I was stressed, and I would watch as they veered off in unhelpful directions, but I was powerless to stop them even when I knew it was happening. I felt trapped by my own brain, which was awful. I learned a trick, though, to help me calm down when I'm feeling like I'm not in control of myself and need to center myself. So, if I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed, I sit in front of my mirror, look at myself, like right into my own eyes, and try to connect with the Adelaide deep in there. To speak to her, taking that time to stop dwelling inside my own head and really look out from way back in there. Then I knocked over a stack of books on my dressing table, which is when you heard me telling off my dumb body. I didn't hear the rest of her words. I felt an involuntary shiver run so far up my back, it traveled past my neck, prickling and tightening the skin across the top of my head. All my senses were screaming danger, telling me I was facing some indescribable horror. That isn't a person I've been speaking to. That body is not a human. It's some sort of shell, a mockery of life. That isn't the creature called human. The human is deep within it, looking out. I couldn't breathe. I needed to leave right at that moment. Abandoning decorum, I turned and fled the room, not stopping until I was safely back in my own quarters with the doors locked behind me. That thing, that wasn't human? What they present is not them. They are not their bodies. They inhabit them, squatting in their shells like some eldritch creature in a cave, peering out through those nightmare eyes. A burrowing parasite, infesting the flesh and making it walk and talk for them. It's been weeks, and I've still not slept a full night through. I'm haunted by thoughts of being trapped or confined in a small space, only being able to look out of tiny black dots. Management won't listen to me anymore when I try to warn them of the imposters, and I think I'm going to be escorted off the orbital with the next roster change, but I cannot bring myself to care. This needs to get out. We've invited horrors into our midst. How can we trust a creature that lives hidden inside another? How can they keep this secret from the galactic community? And why did Adelaide tell me this all so freely? What was her plan? I cannot make sense of it. I fear I'm going mad. I now fear that I am going to turn into one of them, trapped inside my body, cursed to forever look out from the darkness behind my eyes. Enjoy next amazing story. In the entire galaxy, war is fought in a very standardized way. In fact, every war would be fought in 9 distinct phases in which only the first 5 are relevant to this little story of mine. In the first phase, there is no war. Here exists a mere dispute about something. This could be a border dispute, a trade dispute, or you don't like them. It could be anything, really. It could, depending of your standing in your respective society and the power this standing gives. You just being a fellow diplomat looking slightly funny at you. War is inherently stupid and silly. Therefore, the reasons they are fought are as such. But the most common reasons are they have something you want, or they have something you don't want to exist. For us, it was the latter. In the second phase of the war, there exists a conflict of some sort, but no diplomatic conversation yet. Humans would describe it as being butthurt. Basically, you are stewing, either as a nation or as a sufficiently powerful individual in your wants and needs from the enemy, and will show it openly. Maybe through I am applying the powerful diplomat analogy here, voting always against the specific diplomat out of principle, ignoring him, making snarky remarks, or even show full-on non-violent hostility. In the third phase of the war, there is, usually instigated by the other party, a diplomatic discussion to resolve the issue in a non-violent way, through an apology or through admissions from the other party involved. In rare cases, you are even here hell-bent to go to war and won't accept any admissions, apologies, or anything other. Pride is a massive factor in this phase and can let you to believe you have to prove a point. Those are the 3 pre-phases of a full-scale war. No fighting has happened yet, and the war could easily be prevented up until this point. But let's say this has failed. So what is next? But first, my particular case up to this point. In our case as the Nurksali, we didn't like how our new neighbor was expanding into our territory and settling planets we couldn't inhabit, for which they were paying handsomely and single-handedly, boosting our economy nearly 5-fold, as well as prevent a major collapse of our banking system, which the humans called a Great Depression, but still pennies in comparison what they were earning from those planets. The rough estimates of our bankers were that the humans paid us barely 5% of the earnings of those planets if they were to install industry on them. The minerals in the crusts alone would be worth 10 times more what they were paying us for. The right to settle and develop those planets. How dare these barely spaceflight-capable humans? We thought of them as utter cheapskates and portrayed them in our media as such. Greedy liars that would get your offspring for a penny if you are not careful. Well, to be fair here, our estimates were off by quite a bit, and we didn't account for all of the planets they only settled and did not develop. A prime example of one of those planets would be the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, which they turned into a massive memorial for all of their fallen soldiers, which couldn't be brought back for a proper burial. A concept so foreign that we thought of it as either a military installation or a tourist attraction. We were certain that this place made money somehow. So, as the diplomatic talks were starting, we would not settle for anything less than the utterly beautiful but deadly oxygenated green marble, which was the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, For humans, it was a paradise beyond comprehension. The laggest earthquake would not exceed a 1.5. The highest storm wouldn't even count as one on their world, and the most active volcano wasn't due for an eruption for at least another 300 of their years. And even if it would prematurely explode, it would be literally a cakewalk for them to contain the explosion and flowing lava with their shields. The part that made it so deadly for Nurksali was the atmosphere and gravity. With an oxygen level of 20.9% and gravity of 9.8 meant S2, the planet would either poison us with the extreme oxygen levels or crush us into the ground. Grot, our home planet, has an oxygen level of 5.1% and 3.2 main S2 of gravity is equally deadly for a human, if only because they cannot breathe unaugmented, and our carry gas is argon instead of nitrogen, which explains the level of oxygen on our world, as it displaces oxygen. So we demanded, on top of the 90 trillion creds year, that they would either hand over all of the resources of the tomb, including equipment and manpower, so we would make the money, or they would increase their pay by our estimate of the income of the planet, which at the time was calculated to be at 650 trillion creds year. It was only at the end of the war that we learned the planet was run by a non-profit organization called the Intergalactic Red Cross, and was making no money at all over their running costs due to it being almost entirely staffed by unpaid volunteers and various also unpaid charities. Let's just say this pissed the human diplomat off to the point of ripping the armrests off of my guest chair in the office in an attempt to prevent himself from attacking me. We then came to a conclusion, which led to the fourth phase of any war, the official declaration of war, the by far shortest phase of any war. Especially for us, because we predicted their behavior and I had the declaration ready and just gave it to the human in response to ruining my chair. It was a beautiful chair. So, the fifth phase of the war, which incidentally gave this chapter its name, the warring factions would build up their armies and prepare to go to the fight. Usually, this is the longest phase because it takes time to conscript and train an entire army. Note the fact that the standing army of all the species usually only consists of a skeleton crew manning the bases, spacefaring vehicles and installations, as well as special forces and a sufficiently large amount of anti-piracy units. That was where we learned the human term professional military. Of course, it also took them time to gather their troops. But where we usually take up to 3 years before the first fight occurs, reasoning mentioned above, they attacked us in less than a week. In less than a week, they swiped across our space, and the very same ambassador I handed the declaration of war towards literally waltzed 5 days later, flanked by a platoon of soldiers, into my palace and demanded unconditional surrender. This war, or the war over the tomb of the unknown soldier, is still the shortest war in the history of the Galactic Council at the day of writing this, with 4 days, 16 hours, and 32 minutes. 2 days of which the humans were traveling to Grot and defeating the planetary defense. And for anyone wondering, the remaining phases of a standard war before the humans completely shattered that process are as follows. Sixth phase, preparing and agreeing of a meeting place of the two armies. Seventh phase, fighting begins. Eighth phase, surrendering of one faction. Ninth phase, aftermath and reparations. Excerpt from Memoirs of the Last King of the Nurksali, written by High Imperator, founder of the universe, favorite of the gods, ruler of everything above and below, voice of the people and righteous heir of godhood, His Majesty Ismail Nexu Lizmir. Enjoy another story through the organic viewing membranes of the Vakru Tal, a shimmering, feather-like spacecraft more grown than built. Tour guide Vithika clicked her beak with excitement. Her iridescent plumage flared slightly as she gestured to the swirling blue orb below. The tourist guests aboard her vessel, a curious mix of squawking fledglings and elder Haraktir, pressed their talons against the clear membrane, peering down, with wide, gleaming eyes. "This," Vithika trilled, her melodious voice echoing through the biosonic chambers, "is Earth, a world once brimming with naive life forms that lacked both feathers and foresight. Today, we witness it as it stood in their late technological era and strife." The tour group rustled and chattered, their downy feathers vibrating in unison, as they clucked questions. "Primitive," squawked one of the fledglings, a wiry youngster named Krill, his wingtips twitching with juvenile arrogance. They have no flight, no nest dome habitats. How did they survive? With ingenuity and recklessness, Vithika replied, a trace of pity in her voice. Observe their urban nests. They are vertical constructs made of dead rock and metal. No natural growths, no living structures. She flicked a talon at a projected overlay showing the vast cities of Earth sprawled out beneath them like wounded anthills. They called this Manhattan. The Vakrutal began its descent, the ship's natural fibers resonating with the planet's electromagnetic hum. As the vessel glided into Earth's atmosphere, its bioluminescent hull shimmered and refracted light, rendering it nearly invisible. The air outside hissed and roared, but inside the craft, the passengers squawked and fluttered as their viewing chambers adjusted to the chaotic, light-polluted surface below. Earth's early warning systems, relics of paranoid geopolitics, had no problem catching it. Within minutes, air bases across the continental United States scrambled interceptors. Unidentified object detected. Sector 7, velocity unknown, projected course descending over Manhattan. Major Monica Trask, a veteran of 25 years and an unfortunate sufferer of perpetual cynicism, snapped awake in her chair. Another fucking Chinese weather balloon? She muttered, rubbing her temples. No, ma'am, replied Lieutenant Gregson, eyes glued to his console. This one's fast. Too fast. How fast? Trask leaned forward, the tiredness evaporating from her expression. Info just came in. Looking like Mach 8. Sustained. Dropped from low orbit like a goddamn meteor, but slowing down. 6 clicks. Out from the city. Her blood chilled. Spooks have eyes on this? Gregson nodded. CIA's listening. They're panicking just like us. Scramble fighters. Within minutes, 4 F-22 Raptors screamed off the deck of Joint Base McGuire-Dix Lakehurst, slicing through the dry air. Look at their sky, gasped an elder, his voice wheezy with age. It's broken, indeed. The once vast canopy of stars was smothered by the glare of neon lights and industrial haze. Vithika nodded solemnly. They traded their heavens for these lights. They called it progress. The Vakrutal swooped low over a glittering sprawl of highways clogged with primitive groundcraft. The alien tourists gawked. Are they all groundbound? Krill chirped, appalled. They wriggle like larvae in a nest, Vithika chuckled softly. Partially, they relied on these contraptions for daily movement. They never truly mastered flight for the masses. The tourists observed a chaotic spectacle of blaring horns, flickering billboards, and humans scurrying like ants between shops and skyscrapers. The Vakrutal hovered above a popular tourist site, Times Square. The place pulsated with life, foreigners snapping photos, street performers dancing, vendors hawking wares. What are those glowing sigils? Asked Krill, gesturing at the neon advertisements. Advertisements, Vithika explained. Messages designed to coax these creatures into exchanging their precious resources for frivolities. It's an ancient form of mental manipulation. One fledgling's feathers flared in horror. They trick each other? For survival? For greed, Vithika corrected. Down below, a busker belted out a song on an old guitar, while a man in a tattered suit argued loudly with a vendor over a hot dog price. Nearby, a cluster of teenagers jostled each other, laughing over something on their tiny, glowing devices. Fascinating, murmured an elder. Despite their chaos, they seem social. Their vocalizations are crude, yet they laugh and argue, as if it matters. It mattered to them, Vithika replied, her tone thoughtful. They called it living. The Vakrutal shifted its position, gliding above a park, a rare patch of green amidst the concrete jungle. As it descended lower, something unusual happened. A child, no more than 6 Earth years, looked up and pointed. Look, Mommy, a giant bird. The mother glanced up, saw nothing, and shrugged. Stop making things up, Dylan. But Dylan's wide eyes stayed fixed on the ship, his tiny hands waving at the shimmering form. The tourists inside the Vakrutal froze, their feathers ruffling in alarm. He can see us, Krill squawked. Unlikely, Vithika said, though her tone wavered. Our cloaking adapts to their spectrum of sight, but Dylan's grin widened. Bye-bye, birdie. The Vakrutal rose swiftly, leaving the child waving in their wake. Back aboard the Vakrutal, the passengers huddled in the main observation chamber, discussing their impressions. They were odd, said Krill, his bravado gone. Primitive. Yes, but lively. They had no feathers, no flight, murmured another, yet they built things. They communicated, they dreamed. They destroyed themselves, an elder croaked, his voice somber. Perhaps, Vithika said, but they left behind stories, songs, a record of their brief time in the cosmos. For all their flaws, they were remarkable. In their eagerness to show off the grandeur of Earth's late technological era, the Haraktir had forgotten one crucial system. Radar cloaking. Guide Vithika, chirped a junior technician from the flight nest, his feathers trembling. Earth's primitive detection devices are pinging us. Vithika clicked her beak in annoyance. What do you mean, pinging us? They've noticed our descent. Great flock above, she muttered as she glanced over to the horizon. Relay the shielding to maximum. Captain Richard Dice Mallory, leader of the flight, listened as Mission Control fed him updates. Raptor 1, target is moving at Mach 8, now decelerating to subsonic speeds. Coordinates locked. Engage with caution. Copy that, Dice replied, tightening his grip on the stick. Visual confirmation as soon as we're in range. As they neared the anomaly, Lieutenant Elena Ghost Chen adjusted her HUD, toggling between infrared and radar modes. Ghost, you got anything? Negative, Dice. Visuals clear. Sky's empty. But the radar says it's sitting right there above us. She replied, her eyebrows furrowing in confusion. Dice frowned. Command, this is Dice. We've reached target coordinates. Visual is negative. Radar still shows a contact. Inside the Vakrutal's command sphere, Vithika's feathers ruffled in detached fascination as she observed 4 primitive crafts circling below on the organic display membrane, their ancient propulsion systems choking the skies with soot. To your says. Guide, Krill whispered, his talons nervously tapping the floor. They can't see us, can they? No, Vithika replied, her tone clipped. Our cloaking systems are functioning perfectly, but their primitive radar can still detect our mass. Should we engage the Harkra pulse? Another Vakrutal knee? Officer suggested. No, Vithika said firmly. The pulse would fry their sensors, but it might provoke them. They're like hatchlings with talons. They might lash out blindly. The ship's elder, perched near the back, sighed. You should have activated full stealth the moment we entered their atmosphere, Vithika. She bristled, but held her composure. And deprive our guests of their first proper look at this fascinating world? Risk is part of discovery. The key. Vakrutal abruptly shifted its behavior. It began to ascend, vibrating the air with its atmospheric resonance. Holy shit! Shouted one of the pilots as his jet shook violently. Conduct evasive maneuver. Before he could finish, the Vakrutal flared to life within a second. Its bioluminescent surface brightened, and with a soundless ripple of shockwave energy, it shot straight upwards at an impossible velocity as it buffeted the nearby fighters with wake turbulence as they scattered in instinctual panic. It was gone. NORAD was in chaos. The air inside the command center was electric with tension, buzzing with rapid-fire exchanges as officers scrambled to piece together what had just happened. The rows of monitors that once displayed the mysterious object's radar signature now blinked with no signal alerts. Major, target on radar just accelerated to Mach 35, a technician stuttered, his voice cracking. It left the atmosphere in milliseconds. We lost it. She stood silent, staring at the screen. Did it leave any debris? Signals? None. But... The technician hesitated, pointing at the screen. A faint bioluminescent trail lingered in the upper stratosphere, like the afterglow of an aurora. Major Monica Trask crossed her arms, her jaw tightening. Send the data to Langley, and tell Space Command they'd better stay awake tonight. Aboard the Vakrutal, the Haraktir passengers were in a frenzy. That was too close, squawked Krill, his feathers puffed in fear. Vithika sighed. A minor oversight. Their detection devices are primitive, but persistent. Do you think they'll retaliate? Asked another tourist. They lack the means to follow us, Vithika assured them. Still, perhaps we underestimated their curiosity. As the Vakrutal slipped back into the void, Earth quickly shrank below them. Apologies for the sudden change in schedule. The agency would compensate for this accordingly, Vithika announced as she smoothed her feathers. In the meantime, for the next part of our itinerary, we would be visiting the planet's single orbiting moon. As hours passed, word of the unidentified craft earlier had started to spread among the ranks. Pilots from the intercepted mission were already being sequestered into debriefing rooms, their statements filed under classified. The Pentagon issued an immediate information blackout. This doesn't go public, Major. Not a whisper, not a leak, not a damn thing. A black-suited man from the CIA spoke, his demeanor cold and calculated. His name tag simply read, Grant. The Major glared at him. You expect me to just bury this? Those pilots saw it, the ground crew logged it, and we've got radar evidence you'll redact, or we'll find someone who will. Grant leaned in, his voice dripping with menace. You know the drill. Unexplained aerial phenomena. We spin the narrative, and the public buys it. Always has, always will. The next morning, the Pentagon held a press briefing fronted by the Major herself. Her sharp uniform gleamed under the stage lights as she addressed a crowd of reporters, already buzzing with speculation. A routine training exercise involving multiple aircraft encountered unexpected weather anomalies that disrupted radar systems, she said, her tone as smooth as butter. Any reports of unusual sightings are likely misinterpretations caused by atmospheric interference. We assure you there is no cause for concern. A weary reporter from the Associated Press raised his hand. Major, we've spoken to locals in Montana who reported sonic booms and strange lights. Are you saying they imagined it? Trask's smile didn't falter. The sonic booms were likely from our jets, which were conducting high-altitude maneuvers. As for the lights, again, atmospheric conditions. Behind the scenes, the CIA's PR team fed sanitized talking points to media outlets, flooding the airwaves with expert opinions dismissing the incident as nothing more than a freak meteorological event. Back in the command center, Major Trask sat slumped at her desk, staring at the last recorded radar blip of the Vaucrutal. Atmospheric. Interference, my ass, she muttered, lighting a cigarette in open defiance of the building's no-smoking policy. We're sitting ducks if those things come back, and we just told the world it was a damn cloud. Lieutenant Gregson approached cautiously. Ma'am, you should know, some of the team thinks the object deliberately avoided us. It could have attacked, but it didn't. Trask exhaled a cloud of smoke, her jaw tightening. That doesn't make me feel better, Carter. It just means they're watching. Waiting. Hell, maybe this was just a reconnaissance run. As she spoke, an encrypted message from the Pentagon flashed onto her terminal. Terminate all investigation. Into current unidentified aerial phenomena. New directive incoming. All records to be classified in program Immaculate Constellation. And meanwhile, in a small, quaint apartment in Manhattan, Dylan drew a picture of a glowing bird in the sky. Honey, dinner's ready. The kid immediately dropped his crayons as he leapt out of bed. Coming, Mommy! Thanks for diving into this story with me. Don't miss out on the next one. Hit that subscribe button, give this video a big thumbs up, and drop a comment below with your thoughts. I'd love to hear what you think.